Schools are still closed. Many of us can only see loved ones outdoors, and pubs and restaurants remain shut until the middle of next month at the earliest. But slowly, the tone from our leaders is changing. Today, the First Minister stood in front of her podium, which no longer read "Stay at home." Instead, the slogan is now "Stay safe." It came hours after the chief medical officers of the four nations jointly agreed that the threat level from coronavirus should be scaled back from 4 to 3. They believe transmission is no longer high.
And so, in light of this, many are questioning why schools will not be returning to full-time learning in August, including one of Nicola Sturgeon's own MSPs, who has criticised the proposed part-time learning model. But the First Minister says government and councils are working hard to get children back full-time. Our political correspondent Andrew Kerr has more.
School's out for summer, as it has been for spring. Getting as many children back in August is critical, with all hands on deck. Probationary teachers wrote to the Education Secretary, questioning why they weren't being used. John Swinney contacted one of the signatories to say they were a top priority.
It's brilliant that the Minister has now acknowledged it. Now we need action so that every newly qualified teacher has some sort of stability, has employment, and ultimately that we can return to a positive and effective learning environment.
This was brought up at the Education Committee. One SNP MSP was critical of current plans.
My grandchildren have just been told they're going to get from the 11th of August 1.5 days a week at school for the indefinite future. I personally and their parents regard that as absolutely unacceptable. That is not good quality education. It's not blending education, it's bleeding education.
Parents are raising concerns too, of course. They want a route map for education.
At what point can we be expecting full attendance in school? How long is blended learning going to be with us for? And we realise that some of those questions are difficult to answer, but fundamentally, if we were able to say, if the situation is this, then this is what we can expect.
Many are looking to Northern Ireland, where social distancing has been cut to 1 metre for kids. But it's not a panacea. There could still be a teacher shortage.
It could be 15%, it could be 20%, it could be as high as 30% of teachers who may not come back in August, whether because they've got an underlying condition, they're in a vulnerable category, that they've maybe their own kids to care for. The level of childcare is critical in all of this. So we don't actually know how many teachers we will have in August.
The UK Government pledged to spend £1 billion to help children catch up. Scotland will receive its fair share.
Councils need resource and they need money. There's simply no excuse. There are teachers out there who've been turned away that could work in classrooms. The UK Government has supported the Scottish Government throughout this crisis, and any money that comes to the Scottish Government should go to education.
At the briefing, the First Minister said there was a lot of hard work going on.
Even with that limited attendance at schools, there were something like 24 outbreaks in schools in England last week. So we have to be careful and safe about this, but the objective is to get young people back to school as normal and full-time as quickly as we can. And the government with councils are working incredibly hard on making sure we create the conditions to do that.
Normality will not return until the virus is expelled. Andrew Kerr, BBC News.
Well, let's pick up on some of the points raised there with our political correspondent, Lindsay Bewes. Lindsay, schools, education have dominated conversation this week, not just in homes across the country, I'm sure, but between politicians. And the Scottish Government's position also seems to have changed, or at least developed, over the course of the week. What do you make of it?
Yes, Laura, the Scottish Government has encountered a huge amount of scrutiny of its plans on education, and it has to be said, a fair amount of criticism and some anger from parents as well. But as councils have been preparing these plans for blended learning, well, we heard Nicola Sturgeon describe them on several occasions this week as contingency plans. And I think that does raise a question about how schools will go back and whether or not there is a chance that they will go back in a more normal way than perhaps people have been thinking so far. Now, a big part of that is social distancing and the 2-metre rule that's currently in place. And will that change? Well, the Scottish Government has asked for fresh scientific advice on whether that can be changed. And we heard in Andrew's report there in Northern Ireland, they're looking at 1 metre social distancing now being in place for pupils. The Education Secretary, John Swinney, he did say today that if it was to be dropped down to 1 metre, well, that would make a significant difference to the plans councils are drawing up. And what would also make a difference is continued suppression of the virus over the next few weeks. If we see more progress in suppressing the virus, there is a greater chance of a more normal return, I think, for pupils when we get to August the 11th. And we did hear positivity from the First Minister today. She said the virus is firmly in retreat.
Yeah, and just picking up on that, we've also heard today that the UK alert level has been lowered from 4 to 3. How significant do you think that is, and what does it mean in practical terms?
Yes, downgraded from 4, which is defined as a high or rising risk of transmission, to level 3, defined as the virus in general circulation. That was announced by the 4 chief medical officers of the UK nations earlier today. Now, that's the first time we've seen the alert level drop since May 10th, when that system was put in place. So I think it is a significant moment, and it would be associated with the easing of lockdown restrictions. But that doesn't mean that lockdown restrictions will automatically be eased. It will be up to the different administrations across the UK to look at that and apply political judgment to that new scientific evidence that's coming through. And in Scotland, well, we have seen the First Minister move at a slower pace in some elements of easing lockdown than other leaders have done in other UK nations. And I think we're going to see that slow, gradual, cautious approach continue, because Nicola Sturgeon said this week that she thinks that's working and it's going to reap rewards in the long run. So we're not going to see an acceleration of plans to ease lockdown. The First Minister, I think, is going to continue with that gradual, cautious approach, which she's saying is leading to suppression of the virus and is going to work in the long run and prevent us having to go backwards instead of forwards.
OK, Lindsay, thank you for the moment. Thanks for that.